All right. This is road tripping with my dog. I'm with Nicole Charlwood for the Green Party candidate for Nelson-Creston riding for the upcoming election, which general voting's on Saturday on October 24th.
Correct.
How's everything been going?
Well, snap election, so it's been an intense experience for sure, but it's going really well. I'm somewhat bowled over by the attention that voters are giving this election and the interest that our campaign has nationally.
Really?
Yeah.
For this, or for the
this
provincial,
riding,
or for our riding?
Our riding.
Nationally, how come?
Well, we do have a relationship with the Green Party of Canada, so
Yeah.
that brought a lot of attention, and our new leader of the federal Green Party did an event with me a couple nights ago, and so
Where was that?
it was online.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you can check it out. It's
Yeah.
pretty fun discussions. So her taking time out of her by-election, that's Annemie Paul. She took time out of her own by-election. Her election's 2 days after ours here, and she spent an evening with me online and Sonia Furstenau, our provincial leader.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of synergies happening on a national level right now for our party.
Right.
So we just rolled from a leadership race, both federally and provincially, into this election. So there's all this energy that's been built up, and it's just carrying through. And then on top of that, we are now, I believe, the third most likely to go green in the entire province. And so
As a riding.
Right. Yeah. So it's a neck and neck kind of situation here. And
So
yeah.
I kind of feel like because of the last election with Michelle, the way she campaigned really hard against the Site C dam, and then when she got elected, she went full support for it and then went silent. And then people were literally picketing her office and everything, and she wouldn't answer to it. I feel like this riding for all three candidates, so I guess there's a Libertarian too, but
that's true.
he doesn't really get any play. Or is it she? I don't even know. Okay, so
Terry Thiessen is his
right.
name.
Okay, so the four candidates, it's almost like you're starting a quicksand because of the legacy she left of, it's just such a distrust. And people are mad and they're angry. And so she was the final thing for me where I don't even care about platforms anymore, because when you sell me something, I fell for it, and it was totally a lie. And so now I only care about people. Not parties. I don't really like our system. I don't know what I don't like about it. There's something in there.
Wrong, yeah.
And I don't have any answers, but what I care about is getting good people in all the parties. Mm-hmm. So I know Tanya's a really good person, and I know you are by default of kind of the broader scope. So when we're following the whole, the legacy of what happened in the last election in our riding, how can you make us believe that you're gonna,
do differently?
Keep your word? Like I don't even care about the platform promises, because a lot of times half of them don't get met, and the other half that might do it, it's in a shell of itself of what was promised. So I just want to believe in you, and how can you basically make us believe? Because I want to get into your background too, but the big thing for me is just the trust, because I feel like it's broken.
And I think we as a party, I know you don't want to talk parties necessarily, but we were in the legislature with an agreement with the NDP, and so I think we can relate to that distrust. We had an agreement, it was made a legal contract, and that was broken too by calling a snap election. We also are very disappointed with the Site C decision, and I mean, I have a lot of compassion for Michelle Mungal and the fact that she stood so strong against, as you say, in the campaign, and then was literally the minister that approved it in the end. I mean, not only did it not happen, or did it not go the way she had advocated for, but then she was made to be the one to approve it. So that must have been very difficult, I imagine, for her to have to go back on her word like that. To me, that's a party problem and less of a person problem. There's no power for her as an NDP representative to vote differently than her party in all circumstances. I would have more flexibility as a representative, and our party supports the idea of constituents first, then party,
Right.
rather than party first and then constituents.
Okay, don't you think she would have to answer to it though? Like if you're elected to the people and then you like totally 180 them, you should have
Who's
to
holding us
answer
all
it.
accountable?
Like after all,
Agreed.
like you're there to represent us.
That's right.
And so to go silent, like the whole thing with parties and stuff like that is that, like I moved here almost exactly 25 years ago, November 2nd, 1995. And so, and it's gone back and forth the whole time provincially from NDP to Liberals, back and forth, back and forth. And they're all full of scandals. People are always mad. Nothing ever changes. Part of me is just like, screw it, give the Greens a shot. Like just for something
I'll
different.
take it.
I mean, yeah.
I hear you, and can I add to that?
Say what you gotta say.
I would say, and it follows on to your previous question about trust, and that to me touches on one of our core principles as the Green Party, which is, democracy is really important to us, and participatory democracy, which means all votes count. And so we have a broken system right now electorally, and the best solution, given that there was not great support, there was huge support in our riding for proportional representation, so that the number of votes a party gets equals the number of seats they get in the legislature, but that's not what happens right now. So the system's broken, and that's why trust is eroded, I think, is a big part of it. And historically in this riding, we've had two parties, Liberals, NDP, you just talked about that, right? And that polarized. Where else is politics really polarized? Down in the US, right? We can see what happens when there's just two parties who are standing for people, and they become actually quite similar. They act like they're against each other, but a lot of the policies, if you look, NDP and Liberals vote together. So having a third party, it happens to be that the Greens are the strongest third party in this province.
Right.
That really, I like to think of it like a stool. So if you had a two-legged stool, nothing good's coming from that situation. Add a third leg, you get stability, you get another opinion in there. And I would say that our track record over the last few years demonstrates that we have the capacity to hold both parties accountable and make some significant additions to policies that the other two parties bring forward. So even in a minority situation that we had, we only had 2 or 3 seats at any one time. But we still found a way to have quite an impact on policy.
Right.
So that's my offer is, give us a shot, because we've been doing some great work. And with more of us elected in this election, it can only be better with that stronger third voice at the table. And then all people, as you say, all people are represented in every decision. Isn't that a great idea?
Yeah, imagine that.
Whoa. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to, I guess before we get further, just ask about you.
Sure.
So why now? Because there's been, lots of elections. Why provincial versus local, municipal, or whatever? And I have a sense of why the Green Party, but I'd like to know kind of your background and then what brought you to this decision to run here for this election provincially now.
Yeah, so my political career, so to speak, and I wouldn't say I've had a political career, but my interest in government and my respect for government, I was raised to vote. And I had 4 parents, and they were all working for the government. So I was raised in an environment where, and trust me, I questioned it and I rebelled against it through a big period of my life, but I've come back to it. When I was 13 years old, I was a page in the Ontario legislature, which is like, we're brought in to serve all the members of the legislature and run their messages around. And so
are they like the 2 kids that are just kind of right at the front on the floor?
With the throat,
with the whole gown and
Except
everything?
there's actually like 20 of us, or there were.
Oh, wow.
Because they're all running around also in the building, bringing legislation. And now it's probably all online. Maybe there's only 2 now, but
I don't know.
back
I don't
in
really
the day,
pay attention. I've basically given up.
Yeah.
So I don't trust them. It's just the same stuff year after year, election after election. Politicians talking politician-y talk. It's so disingenuous, and it's just not authentic at all. I just, like I said, I only care about people because I look, like I said with Tanya, I look at politicians and stuff like a garden, where you need to pull the weeds out and you need to feed it with proper
and
good
it's
loving.
only as good as what's there.
Yeah,
right?
if you want to flourish. So if you get good people in all the parties, good people want to do well for the people.
That's right.
Or just for anything, and they're willing to work with each other. I'm tired of just politicians. you know. So that's why I asked that whole thing about people and stuff. So my next I have kind of three real questions that are both local and also provincial. And they're big problems. Number one is mental health and the problems with that. Like we have, and you know, last year on Baker Street, we had a woman walking down the street randomly stabbing people.
Yeah, my friend is still healing from that experience.
Oh, you
Stephen
knew?
Fowler, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like, because I moved here in 1999, and Nelson, because I always say in the comparative value to itself, because Nelson's fantastic. If I leave the area, or just the West Kootenay, I just want to come back home. Like, it's great. But within that, we have problems, and they're kind of, it's like they're getting worse, they're not getting better. So how do we address that? Like, I know it's complex, but...
Well, it is and it isn't. To us, it's a pretty simple solution. Make it a priority. And when we're talking mental health, I mean, you're talking about street issues, and it goes into every part of our society, mental health, and the need for support. And so we are definitely committing to a setting of that as a priority within healthcare and making it publicly accessible services. Mental health is not part of our current medical service plan in any significant way. So it should be free, and we should be investing easy $1 billion into it alone.
Yeah,
Just the mental health piece.
Yeah, because it's not even just the people on the street and stuff like that, because the suicide rate that I've seen in the past 4 or 5 years is crazy. I've never seen anything like it. And it's just like, I've lost a lot of friends that way, and then attempted friends that way. And it's just a serious issue, and it doesn't feel like it's being taken seriously like it should be.
Make it a priority, right? And with your vote, you can actually set those priorities, and you probably have two choices in that regard. It just depends on where the party might be trying to get the money to pay for services like that. But absolutely is a priority, and I'm hearing about that even in the schools. I mean, children are asking that question. Right. Can we have counselors in our schools? This is local. I'm not talking about sort of the demographics out in the broader province or even nationally, but locally. I'm knocking on doors in Creston, and I've had, now I can count on two hands the number of people who cried at the door. Because we even wondered about, should we be door knocking during COVID election? Oh, yeah, actually, we really should be, because the amount, people are so hungry for connection and to be heard. And so to have a human show up to their door, spaced, masked, the whole thing, but to be available, and then the sadness and the grief that people are feeling. Long-term care is a big one, where spouses even are being kept apart for 3 hours a week they're getting to spend together, and they're not allowed to touch.
Oh, because of the whole COVID thing? Yeah, my grandma, she ended up dying, but when she was in the hospital, no one could go, like, I think it all had to be facilitated through one of, like, my stepdad or one of my aunts or something. Like, no one could just go there, and it was crazy. But so
there's a lot of questions about, how are we going to move forward with our concerns for health and trying to protect our elderly, people on the street, homeless. I mean, there's lots of concerns in that regard, but is separating everybody, a good long-term solution because of the impacts on our mental health, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, huge concern across all ages, all sectors. Yeah, it's pervasive.
So then, talking about homelessness, like that's my next thing, is the housing, like the rental rates and stuff. Here, it's insane. I could be homeless soon because my house is being sold, and I got to find a place to rent, and no one can find them anywhere. Like you see on like the Nelson or West Kootenay rental thing, it's just all people looking instead of actual listings. And that's a massive problem throughout the entire province. I mean, really across the country. But so housing, how does that play into what you guys, your kind of mindset with stuff? Because we got to take care of the people, and we got to house them.
Housing first. There are so many good programs throughout the world that if people are housed, there are so many other benefits, and in fact it's a really great investment from an economic perspective, because the dollars you put into making sure everybody's housed, so a lot less than is needed if they aren't housed and are left to sort themselves out.
Yeah,
And you're
the
right.
residual impact of it.
It's exponential, right? What happens if we aren't caring for each other? So it is a basic right and necessity in life. And we've set a 10-year goal to ensure that everybody has access and is able to be housed. And that, what you're talking about, isn't even just, again, not just one demographic. Housing is an issue across the board. We can't, even middle class people can't find affordable housing. So it isn't a poverty situation, right? It is a housing crisis.
Yeah, it's
And
totally a crisis.
there are countries like Finland that have invested since there was a big housing boom. It was the 80s or 90s where there was a lot of international investment in housing. It was seen as, again, just how we've been talking, that's a great investment for people. And we stopped creating social, public, all sorts of housing models that were generated by government. That used to be something we just continually did. I agree, we should continually do that. It's not just let's just build a whole bunch and then it'll be fine again. It's this continuing to restock and add housing stock. And that might look like a lot of people aging into maybe more assisted living care. So a glut of houses could come up with this current demographic shift we expect over the next 10 years. Maybe government's buying up some of those houses and retrofitting them into, multi-unit buildings, for example.
Right.
So there's so many housing solutions out there. There isn't just one demographic nor one model. Assisted living is going to be a huge piece of housing people in the future.
Right.
We talked about the opioid crisis. There's need for assisted living. So that means
that's a
housing,
whole
but
other
with the
thing.
supporting services. Children aging out of foster care who aren't ready to care for themselves out in the world. And how are they affording housing right now? And they can't go back to their foster homes, right? So assisted living for them, assisted living for elderly people too. So there's different kinds of housing that we can look at. And I think that's up to communities. We are kind of looking for solutions out there, and there's good ideas, but what's going to work and what's really needed in our local communities. And that means Caslow is different than Creston is different than Nelson.
Oh, all places they're individual to themselves.
And they all have
function different.
plans, actually, right? We don't need to kind of rethink this. A lot of communities know what their housing needs are. It's where's the money to pay for it? And again, I say provincial government needs to make it a priority.
Well, when we talking about finance or money, I think there's a real mismanagement of money. And the easy thing to say for that, or example of it, is this summer, the road paving from Tagum Bridge to the Orange Bridge, because 90% of those roads were fine. And so it's just, to me, it's just simple, like you take the money from roads and you transfer it to healthcare, and because we don't need that for they're good for several years. They were fine. Drove me nuts. And then I didn't care about all the traffic problems and stuff like that some people were complaining about, because they did it overnight for the most part. But it was just the money, because we need money for other things. And why would you tear up a road just to pave it when it was already fine? And that's millions of dollars. And to me, even stuff like the grant to the theater, because no one sees more movies than I do. I have a lot of health problems. I can't do stuff, so I go see a movie, just unplugged by myself. But I still think $2.4 million is nuts. If they were just given $1.4 million, they'd be like, oh my God, that's amazing. And then you have that other $1 million, for healthcare, that's $20,000, $50,000 a year salaries that you can do. That's 4 people for 5 years type thing, just in one thing. To me, the money's there. It's just being put in weird places, and then they build all these signs to say we built roads. We know who built the roads. That's a waste of money. So have you guys, is that something
Actually, you asked me earlier about why I'm running, and my background is economics and international trade, and I have a lot of finance work. So I've worked as a treasurer locally in many not-for-profits and that kind of thing. So to me, that's a piece of what I'm bringing personally to the job. I agree with you, and the chunk of money that I'm eyeing is all of the fossil fuel industry subsidies and waiving of royalties that we've promised as a provincial government. So there's billions of dollars in that pool.
Yeah, so my next thing was, not as much like the pipelines and all that. I mean, that's the whole thing. But it's clear cutting old growth forests, and clear cutting watersheds. Like Glade, they're just about to do that since they got the new ferry, so they can bring the trucks over. I know Weimer's struggling with that, Balfour and stuff, and and that's just here. Then there's like it's been going on forever. Like I've known for at least 30 years. When you get back to Temagami in Ontario and Clayoquot Sound, we know that it's wrong. We know scientifically it's wrong. We know morally and ethically it's wrong. It's adding to all the the forest fires that are a huge problem in our province. So to me, it's just madness that it's still allowed to continue, and they're still plowing forward with it, like the current government that I have no respect for. I can't get past the lies from the last election. But when we know this much, 30 years of information knowing that it's wrong and still allowing it, I don't even understand how that's allowed to continue.
So a year and a half ago, my husband and I did research on all of the tenure that's been given to logging companies and where they're going to be logging over these next few years. And there are 44 watersheds around Kootenay Lake alone that are slated
Seriously?
for clear cutting, that have consumptive, so people with water licenses on them. And when we discovered that, on behalf of the Green parties locally, not the provincial Greens, but locally, we put together a letter. So I worked with Quartz Creek, Weimer, I worked with Glade, I worked with Laird. I'm a representative for Area E Watershed Group. We've got an advisory council there that I'm a part of. All of this came from this research and recognition of exactly what you're saying. And why are we still clear cutting? We're not anti-logging. We're not even anti-wood. We love wood. There's lots of jobs that could be in wood if we kept the wood local in our communities, but we are clear cutting. There's even a supporter on my campaign who didn't realize, we were talking, he was asking me why we were running. I said, well, really forest clear cutting should be stopped immediately. It's not a productive form of, it's not allowing for that sustainable practice of forestry in our communities. It's destroying our watersheds and not creating more work. Like it could create so much more work for us. We could be protecting species and diversity and all of that and still having a forestry sector, one that's growing, not also being propped up with hundreds of millions of dollars a year. We're not making any money on that industry either. We're actually paying more and subsidizing it than we're making from it. That can be turned around and still have a growing industry. So I hear you on the concern. We sent a request for a moratorium on clear cuts from our riding. We got a no on that from the NDP government. But we did make it a dense request so that they had to follow up with a dense response and actually have some thought put into their responses. Something that we will continue to do a hard press on in the legislature when we get back in there for sure. And then let's talk about old growth. You talked about that too. We have local experts who have done the analysis on the fallacy that the old growth protection that the current government has offered. It's hollow. We are not protecting our old growth. We've protected like 1%. And we've got 3% left or something, right?
So it's madness.
It is absolute madness, and the devastation that will follow on the heels of complete annihilation of our old growth is mind-boggling and quite upsetting. So that is a priority too for us.
Well, yeah, like I tried to watch some of the leaders debate, but I mean, as soon as the moderator opened her mouth, I was horrified because it was just the most phony program. She's like a program robot with the same old questions, and then it just seemed politicians being politician-y. So I just don't know how they can, I'm just upset about it.
Yeah,
I don't know how they can keep going with the same model. Like, you go to the hardware store, you're getting clear cut. I don't think we're going to eradicate it, but keep it away from old growth. Keep it away from watersheds. And like the old growth, it's not going to come back. You chop it down, it's gone. Like, and if they were sustainable, they should, with the old, when they've been clear cutting years ago, to replant properly, and the proper species of trees. I know that they
Yeah, and
plant the wrong ones
yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff, and that
Yeah.
creates a whole other problem. But part of it, before I shut off the leaders debate, they're talking about 2050, like for these 30-year goals. I'm like, seriously? Like, in about 1985, as a little kid in Wasaga Beach, Ontario, I knew about acid rain, hole in the ozone. We're doing recycling then. So you give that 5 years, that puts us to 1990. If we did 30-year goals then, we'd be here now and with way less damage. And now here we are with all this crazy stuff, and like we're still thinking 30 years from now. Like 2050, I couldn't even imagine. Like I can't even imagine 10 years, like because it's like the literal cliche snowball effect. Although there will be no more snowballs melting in the fires.
That's just going to be a figure of speech.
Yes, a lost one. What are snowballs? So.
No, I hear you, and that's why we've made a point of saying we need 5-year goals, actually. Like, let's start laying out more immediate goals, this pushing it down the line,
Yeah.
right? And that, to me, again, is a fault of our electoral system. We have 4-year turnover, and people want to get reelected.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you're making promises, you're making, right? And I only need to account for that 4 years. And I would argue in this election, wow, I'm really impressed at sort of the bigger picture way voters are thinking and are paying attention and demanding more immediate response to climate change, and we need drastic, rapid change. So pushing it down the line is not going to help. So yeah, setting goals within 5 years, and then within 10, having a lot of shifts already happening. Before 2050, I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, because if they started even 20 years ago, when people were well aware, it's because a lot of people, they're worried about their jobs. So if they started doing it gradually and sustainably to transition, the jobs they wouldn't disappear, they would just change or evolve. And so, like, because I get it, it's same with oil and gas, you need your jobs, everyone.
Yeah, transition's vital.
But now it's like you got to do it so abruptly that it just jolts stuff because it's kind of crisis time. But like I look at climate change different than a lot of people because I don't even care about the climate change discussion, debate, argument, however you want to talk about it. I just see it as we poison the air we got to breathe, we poison the water we got to drink, we poison the food we got to eat, and we poison the land we got to live on, which is literally insane. So if you just fix those things, let's stop doing that, the whole climate change discussion disappears. You just do what's sensible. Let's stop poisoning everything. I mean, I get the whole thing with when you're talking pipelines and stuff with our own oil, instead of importing it from the Mideast and stuff, let's do it here. But ours is so dirty, but we're using it anyways. But there's just more.
So reduce the amount we need to use and use other sources for energy, right?
Well, see, that's the thing. The one thing that I don't think people are talking about near enough is hemp. I mean, hemp can replace all our plastics, or if not all of them, our oils, paper, toilet paper, writing paper, clothing. I mean, even for hemp versus cotton, it takes less water. And per square foot or cubic foot or whatever.
And I'm hearing in Creston, where we've got our best growing area, the water is on the decline there, and farmers are really worried. So if we're finding lower water crops, that would be a great option.
Well, yeah, like where I live, it'll be raining out and people are still watering their lawn. And I'm like, just because we have this big river and lake, like it doesn't mean, like you look at the rest of the world, and it's dropping drastically. But hemp, it can replace a lot of lumber. It can revitalize farming and stuff like that. And I just don't hear it enough because it's just everything seems to be oil and gas. Those are the conversations. Climate change. I mean, it can help with that hemp can reduce a lot of the logging, which like we talked about already, the reduction of habitat, and then it's just like a tinderbox for fires and stuff.
Lots of work in there. We're looking for those jobs. Let's clean up our forests and rehabilitate them. So much work in there.
Yeah, like I mean, how long have you lived here?
20 years.
Okay, so you were here in 2003.
Yeah.
That was the first big year. Like in 1998, when I lived on Salt Spring Island, that was the first big fire introduction for me, where a lot of people
Same.
were going to take care of the fire or just go to work it because there wasn't really big jobs on Salt Spring. And then when I moved here in 99, it was the 2003 year where we literally had ash snowing down.
I remember.
And it was crazy. And like the entire province has burnt down since then, except for us. I mean, we've had little, close like 6 Mile and stuff like that. But there was all this talk about doing like kind of a cut fire ring around town to kind of protect it and stuff like that.
That's happening right now.
Is it?
Klasnikov.
Where to do it properly or part of the whole Cottonwood thing? I mean, that's heartbreaking. The
Cottonwood is a private land logging, which is a whole
Yeah.
other, and the person who's responsible for that also did a huge clear cut above Windle Lake and is threatening north of the lake. So,
How much do they own? Like crazy.
all over the province. I mean, this is somebody who's just a predatory logger, essentially,
Right.
just going around finding little
So-
private land that can be logged. And
What's Kolesnikov doing with the?
they're working with the city
Right.
above to do some, what you're saying. There's that little clear cut chunk up there.
Right. Okay. So, say you're elected. What do you hope to achieve, and how, and to just go about it? Because one of the things I was talking about the other day was this has bothered me for a long time since I left Vancouver, is that the Vancouver and Victoria media, as well as all the politicians, it seems like they only care about Vancouver, Victoria, Kelowna, and Prince George. For some, who knows what reason, they consider...
Because we're not on Twitter here.
Yeah, well, they consider Prince George northern BC. When you
Right.
look on a map, it's in the middle. So it's like everybody else doesn't count. And we're like right at the end of the line between Calgary and Vancouver, which I love. But it just seems like all the fringe areas, it's like they don't even exist. And our voice counts. It matters. I mean, that's where all the resources come from.
We're stewarding this land right now. Don't you want us to do a better job of it? Because
Yeah.
it's a benefit to everybody.
Yeah, so what would, like, because I don't even know, like the election's on the 24th, but within all the mail-in ballots and stuff like that, is there going to be an announcement that day? Like, 'cause
We're wondering too.
Yeah.
I don't believe that there should be an announcement on election night because so many ballots are mail-in. So how could we possibly think we have results
Right.
on election night? So I'm not expecting to hear anything on the 24th. And we have been booked, and that we've been told it might shift, but we've been booked to go because you, as a campaign, can have attendance for the count.
Right.
So they can be witnessing the count.
Oh.
And we've been asked to book scrutineers, they're called, for, I believe it's November 6th to 8th. So there's
Okay.
going to be some counting locally in November-ish. So,
So it's going
I'm
to be a
expecting
while,
a couple weeks
like almost
to have an
mid-November.
announcement. Yeah. So it's just yet one of the changes that we're experiencing in this election.
Well, yeah, and so that's directly resulted from COVID. So
That's
let's
right.
talk about that.
Okay.
Because that's a massive thing. I know, because I've fallen into food writing. I don't know how, but I did.
You like food?
Well, yeah, but
Like to
I'm a total random guy. I write about whatever. But then I started writing about food, and then people they liked it, caught on, and I just kind of got into it. So aside from that, I know a lot of restaurant owners and executive chefs and stuff, and I've seen how hard they've gotten hit. But it's going to be kind of worse now with the patio season coming to an end and the reduction of their capacity for in their restaurants, and there's people that have lost their businesses and stuff because, we're left with this mess because everybody's an armchair athlete. They think they had the answers. They're cursing out all this stuff at the beginning. At the beginning, we didn't know what to expect. It was all crazy, and the science or not science or all this is changing all the time and stuff like that. But to me, the way I look at it, it's not going away. If you want to look at nothing more than how the U.S. did or didn't handle it, it's not going to go away. We can't hide forever, but the funding's gone because we just blew it. And then a lot of people have lost a lot of stuff, the mental health aspect is very serious for that too. But talking about the money and stuff in the economy, how do we move forward through that while still trying to do policies to keep people safe, regardless of how you feel about it? Like I personally, I don't wear masks because I have health problems. I actually in July had to get a CAT scan to eliminate the possibility of a brain tumor. And that's just my arthritis stuff where my tendons and ligaments attached to my skull. So if I wear a mask, I start like having blackouts, and like if I kind of pan looking from there to there, I'll lose gaps and stuff and headaches. So I don't wear them, but I don't care. Like some people are very vicious for them, vicious against them. I don't care. Wear them, don't. Because I almost look at it as an individual thing. I understand what's going on, but when you look at, there's more opioid deaths than all of it anyways. It's such a kind of crazy, it's complex too, depending on how you look at it, but the real effects of what it's done to the economy.
And our communities and our neighbors.
Yeah, so we've spent the money, now we got to recoup that somehow, but people have lost their businesses and there's not much left to give to help.
Province has some, and we're totally looking at that. And I would add to the, we're more small business than any other kind of business. So small businesses are hit even more hard than other businesses.
Absolutely.
And then compound that with all the tourism that we are used to having in our communities in this area, and that the border's shut. And there was an uptick for a couple months in the summer. So I just talked to all the businesses, right? And everybody's like, phew, right? That was okay. Like, because the last 2 months really picked up and we made up for any losses.
Yeah.
Some didn't have any loss at all. They just found ways to just keep motoring through, and there was an uptick. And now places like Baldface Lodge aren't going to be open this winter, so restaurants locally are concerned about that even lowered traffic.
Yeah.
So, and we recognize as a party that the small business and especially tourism operators are going to suffer extra potentially this winter, and small businesses know it. They're concerned. So the province does have money that can be directed to, and what we're suggesting is rental support, so that businesses can keep their business locations and have rental support through the winter. And then there's loans, grants for small businesses that are getting amplified, because again, a lot of the small business people fell through the cracks. They could lay off staff, CERB picked them up for a while. And we're also advocating, and I'm sure you've heard about universal basic income. So having a uniform, more, frankly, less bureaucratic process to support anyone who's struggling. It doesn't matter what business you run, or if you're a senior, your youth who's trying to get education. If you need support, let's have something that's more universal so that everybody has a livable, a living wage.
Okay.
Always, or access to that if
Right.
you can't help manifest it yourself. So then in these lower times, like a COVID moment, then there are these supports that will always be there. And in long term, it costs a lot less than panic, shock to our system, throw lots of money at it. We spend way more than we have to if we just had some better.
Well, we're
social
very
safety net.
reactionary.
Right? So
For
something
sure.
more proactive is what we're advocating for. So I know there's a lot of, again, it's complex and there's lots of options, but
It's
that's the
weird. Some of
approach
it's
for-
really complex that isn't, and some of it seems simple, but it's complex, and it's just swimming through it all. But so you mentioned the universal income. A lot of people don't know about that, or kind of the intricacies with it. What's your guys' take on it, like from the green side, and how to implement it, and what it's going to look like and mean for everything?
Yeah, I think that, the details would be up for discussion, because there are lots of successful models of it through around the world, but we can look to Manitoba and Ontario.
That one from the 70s or whatever?
Yeah, we've been interested in this idea actually, and across party lines, I'd like to add, we've been advocating for decades on it, so it's not a new idea for Greens, but other parties have been interested, and it sounds like federally there is, again, renewed interest in it. So we're here to help support that conversation. What I like about it, from an economic perspective, is, again, it sort of simplifies our infrastructure of government and systems to support. And looks less at why you might need the money and just giving you the money to get the services or whatever that you need, whether it's housing, that kind of thing. So there's a way to sort of simplify the process, because people who need access to supports don't need a complicated system to figure that out.
It can't be as loose
It's hard
as
to access.
Yeah, but it can't be as loose as the
CERB.
because
No, it can't.
I mean, some people, businesses when they were reopening, some of them were having a hard time getting staff back because it was like a paid summer vacation. And then, I mean, even the CERB money, the way that had a massive impact on a lot of the homeless people because they didn't have that money, and
That's right.
they unfortunately have chosen to feed it to the addictions. And I mean, addiction's a huge issue too. But there had to be, the way I kind of felt was if you had a job and then you got laid off, like pretty much almost everybody did, as soon as your boss kind of came back and said, okay, you know, we're reopening now and it's time to go back to work, and ask you to come back, if you say no, to me, you should now CERB should be off. Because your job is there, you're not willing to take it. Because I just know business owners that their applications just shrunk. Because it was like a paid summer vacation for some. So it's got to be accessible and easy, but it can't just be, here you go, we'll figure it out
Employment
later.
insurance, people make the same complaints about that. There are people who dance around in the system too.
George Costanza, man.
Yeah, so it's, there's no avoiding it, but the statistics show it's a very small percentage of people that abuse the system, and that more predominantly people feel supported. They want to actually work and be a useful member of society. So it doesn't feed that issue. There's usually other reasons people aren't motivated. Maybe that job wasn't so good or a good match for them.
Right.
And so CERB might be seen as they're being home lazy. Maybe they're actually redirecting their energies, going, that wasn't really working for me, and I have this opportunity to think about my life in a different way, and I'm going to take this extra month to maybe get some new training and decide what I'm going to do with the next phase of my life. So I'm sorry for the employers who couldn't attract, and I know that was painful too, and there's shifts going on all through our society. And I think there would also be checks too, so that it wasn't just this free flow. So what I've heard with CERB and done a little research on is lots of money going out, and they're going to ask for some of that back. Can you imagine? So you've been given this money.
Well, they're going to tax it
and now you
hard.
need to hold it, make sure that, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, there's no
We'll just give it to everybody just
ridiculous.
in case, but then if we decide later that you don't qualify, we're going to take it back from you. So better to check, make sure that we actually want to give that money out in the first place, rather than giving it and taking it back to that.
Yeah,
that destabilizes people all over again.
Yeah, come tax time next year, a
So
lot
good,
of people
more trauma or whatever on people, because all of a sudden they have to come up with all this cash to pay their taxes.
Yeah, just crazy.
Yeah.
So just
Maybe one more?
Pardon?
One more question, maybe?
Yeah, and just to sum up, how's it been, the feeling of doing you talked about knocking on doors and stuff. Your reception's been good?
Reception's
Everything's all right?
been good. Yeah, I mean, again, I talked about there's a lot of grief out there and concern, and there's also a lot of hope. So hearing people's ideas about, we're in rough times, but it's been pretty cool to solve problems with my neighbors and kind of hunker down and be more local in mindset. So it's kind of this bittersweet thing happening. And I would say there's a lot of anger. You expressed it earlier at even being in an election right now.
Well, the way they called it was crazy.
So there's anger about that. There's anger with Site C. So there's a lot of, for me, it's been interesting. This is my third provincial campaign that I've been seriously involved in this riding. My first time as candidate.
Right.
I've been campaign manager the last 2 times. So I learned a lot and heard a lot. And we have never had the volume of NDP support shift over. I mean, it's always been this, NDP's green enough, and we're not telling people, we're being told NDP is not green enough, and this is the election, we're switching. So it's going to be interesting to see the results.
Yeah,
really
well,
interesting.
totally. Like I just, because there's some very fanatical NDP people in this riding, absolutely, and they'll get to like petty stuff, like holding grudges, all that stuff.
And they will never vote any other way.
To me,
They're
I personally
devoted.
feel like the NDP should go to the room and think about it for just the way they've lied to us and some of the record of what they've done. Even the way they did this, where they were no doubt prepared. They called the election and you guys are scrambling. Like that's not okay. You gotta be fair and transparent, which people in government talk about, but it rarely
We actually had an
happens.
agreement with them with that in writing, and they still weren't.
Yeah,
They still
so
surprised us.
That's
so.
why I've given up on that.
Fair
I'm
enough.
just believing it. But like I said, I've looked at from 1995 going back and forth, NDP Liberal, NDP Liberal. I still don't know who I'm voting for, but at the same time, I'm like, well, why not give the Greens a chance for 4 years? What's the worst that can happen compared to what has already happened? Try something different. So is there anything else you want to say?
I think that's a great way to end. Try something different. And those who are already green, you can stay. I would add that.
Okay, that's great.
Thanks for your time, Steve. It was really nice to meet you in person finally.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, following you for several years, so yeah.
Yeah, my big mouth.
No worries. It was great talking with you.
Right on. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Look at you, you've been so good.
Where's my glasses?
Hey, you've been so good.